The Sikha we will be learning is in the Kute Siches Helik of Tes, and it's the Sikha and Parshas Shlach, Helik of Ches, and Sikha Beis in Helik of Ches. In Parshas Shlach, it talks about beginning, big Helik of the Parsha talks about the Meraglim. The Chet HaMeraglim, that the Eden didn't want to go into Eretz Yisrael, and because of that, they wished to made Exeda, they should stay 40 years in the desert, etc., etc. Then a little later, it talks about Avodah Zarah, the Isur of Avodah Zarah, the prohibition of doing Avodah Zarah, worshiping idols, worshiping other gods. And then the Torah tells us about the story of the Mekashes. Mekashes was a person that was caught gathering wood on Shabbos, which is one of the malachas, and they didn't know what to do with him, and Moshe Rabbeinu said to put him in jail, and they waited, and the Eibusha said to stone him, because if you're Mechal Shabbos, you get stoned. So the Rebbe talks about the connection between these parshas. Nisof Parsha saying the bring Rasha for Reb Moshe Hadarshan at the end of our parsha, meaning Shlach. Rasha brings in the name of Reb Moshe Hadarshan, and he says like this: Loma nismach o parshas mekeshes lo parshas Avodah Salilim, which we refer to as Avodah Zarah. Why in the Torah do we find that the Torah wrote the story of the mekeshes, or the one that gathered the wood, close to the parsha that deals about idol worship, about Avodah Zarah? Leimer, to tell you that there is a similarity between the two. If somebody desecrates the Shabbos, as Mechala Shabbos is equivalent to worship Avodah Zarah. Because Shabbos is also like all the mitzvahs. Just like Avodah Zarah is such a special Aveda, so terrible that it's like all Avedas, because it's the Yesod, the foundation of all Avedas. Shabbos is also, Shkula is like all the mitzvahs. So that's why the Torah puts them together. But there's another reason written why the Torah writes the story of the Mekashes here, and that is in Tosfos. In Tosfos, the Baba Basra state, it says like this: Maisha Mekashes hoy betchilas haboyim. The story of the Mekashes was in the beginning of the 40 years when the Eden were in the desert. Miyad acher Maisa Meraglim, right after Meraglim. So the Tosfos explains the connection between the story of the Mekashes with the earlier part of the parsha, which is the Meraglim. What's the connection? The Omer b'Medrash, it says in Medrash, to the Shem Shemayim Niskaven, that the Mekashes who did this Chilul Shabbos had in mind L'Shem Shemayim, did it for a good reason. He had in mind for the sake of Hashem. What was the story? Shoyemerim Yisrael, because the Yidden were saying, since they made Exeda, this happened right after the Meraglim. They made the decree after Meraglim that they will not go into Eretz Yisrael. So they said, so we don't have to do any mitzvahs anymore. And he wants to prove that it's not true. You still have the obligation of Torah mitzvahs. So that's why he went and was Machal Shabbos Kadesh Yehorig, so he will get killed. The Yiracherim, so everybody will see, I'll be afraid, whatever how we teach it. So he was going to show the Yidden that mitzvahs still go on. So he did it L'Shem Shemayim. Well, if he says moving the smichas from Parsha Mekashes, calls Parsha Seinus, and now we understand the connection between the story of the Mekashes with the general theme of the Parsha. The theme of the Parsha is a Meraglim. Was ist der Ike Sipper bei Parsha Seinu, und al Shema wird angerufen die ganze Zeit der Parsha Shlach. The main story of the Parsha, the story of Mekashes in the same parsha as the Meraglim, for a Maisa Mekashes is Gekumen al Tzitzof from Maisa Meraglim, because the story of the Mekashes came as a result of the story of the Meraglim. Now, according to this, is a different reason. So it doesn't seem to have a connection, according to Tosfos, have a connection to the union of Avodah Zarah. So we had first one connection of Avodah Zarah that Rashi brings for the Moshe Hadarshan. Now Tosfos gives a different connection, the connection between the Mekashes and the Meraglim. But the Rebbe is going to show that even according to Tosfos, there has a connection to Avodah Zarah. The Baal Torah stellt Parshas Avodah Zarah zwischen Maisa Meraglim and Parshas Mekashes, since the Torah puts Avodah Zarah, the Parsha Avodah Zarah, between the story of the Meraglim and the Mekashes. Like I said before, first it tells the story of the Meraglim, then it says other dinim, and then it says the inyan of Avodah Zarah, and then it says Parsha Mekashes. His movement, so we understand as Eich Ledas Tosfos, even according to Tosfos, that the connection of the Mekashes, why it's written here, is connected to the story of the Meraglim. But this Parshas Mekeshes Tzayich to Parsha Avodah Zarah. Even according to Tosfos, it's connected to Avodah Zarah. Al derech wie Rashi bringt for the Meish Darshan, like Rashi brings Meish Darshan. And with Tosfos is Masber the Gemara, and like Tosfos explains the Gemara. Tosfos says like this: when it comes to the Mekeshes, Tosfos says, Yedei Hoy Meish Rabbeinu Sham Mekeshes b'Miseh. When the Mekeshes Mechal Shabbos, Moshe knew that the punishment is death. Because it says already earlier in Parsha Kisisa, the Eibusha said, if you Mechalal Shabbos, Meis Yumas Yudai. So he didn't know which Misa. That's what the Gemara says. Didn't know. So what he was waiting for to find out from the Eibusha was which one, because there are 4 types of death punishments, death penalties, and he didn't know which one. So Tosfos says that this was the Gemara said. Tosfos says, "Afagav the misa stam cheneki." Even though when the Torah says misa, usually it's chenek, and here the Torah says mechalaleh meis yumas, that if mechal Shabbos you die, so it should be chenek. But teichasvore. So the question is, why did Moshe wonder? He should have known. He should have assumed that it was chenek. So because svore medamel aved Avodah Zarah, he compared the chilul Shabbos in his mind as a svore to Avodah Zarah, which by Avodah Zarah is viskila, he gets stoned. Because why did he think it's compared to Avodah Zarah? Because Mechal Shabbos befar Hesya kekefer bike, because somebody's Mechal Shabbos in public is like denying in the essence of the Torah, the kefer b'maisa breishis. Because if you don't keep Shabbos, then you're denying in the creation of the world. Because that's the whole idea of Shabbos, that shows that we believe the Eibusha created the world in 6 days and a 7-day rest, etc., etc. B'meila, if someone's Mechal Shabbos, so Moshe understood this like Avodah Zarah. B'meila, he thought maybe it's like Avodah Zarah, and then was Takadei, but she said stone him. So we see that even according to Tosfos, because Tosfos brings, even according to Tosfos, that it's connected to the story of the Meraglim, it also has a connection to Avodah Zarah. So this all to show that there's a connection between the Mekeshes and the Avodah Zarah, and also according to Tosfos, a connection to the Meraglim. And then the Rebbe adds, I could add, that till now it comes out, die Sheiches from Parsha Mekeshes to Parsha Avodah Zarah is not in the Metzem Chet from Shabbos Avodah Zarah. So far it comes out that what's the connection? It's connection in the concept of the Aveira. The Aveira of Avodah Zarah and the Aveira of Chil Shabbos and the Aveira that the Meraglim did, they're all very terrible Aveiras. The Mekeshes is Chil Shabbos is similar to Avodah Zarah. And the Inyan, he was the Mekeshes from Mechal Shabbos in order to show that you chai b'mitzvahs. So we see the connection to the chatoyim, to the different avedas that's going on here. But from them, what the smichas is not some in achetz tam for Chil Shabbos. But since we see the connection of Avodah Zarah is not just to the aveda of being Mechal Shabbos. There's some chet from Mekeshes that gets connected to what the Mekeshes did. Is mistaber zu sagen, makes sense to say, as Parshas Avodah Zarah, the Sheichas to them even Chil Shabbos, be given by Mekeshes. So it must be, it seems that the connection between Avodah Zarah has a connection not just to the union of Chil Shabbos, to the way the Chil Shabbos happened in this story with the Mekeshes, that what L'Shem Shemayim Niskaven. He was talking Mechal Shabbos, but he meant L'Shem Shemayim. So something in that concept of being Mechal Shabbos with the intention of L'Shem Shemayim, that specific way of Chil Shabbos, that's the connection to Avodah Zarah. And the Rebbe continues, we could say, the Balda das Alts is Hatil from Parsha Shlach. And since all this, both of these things is a part of Parsha Shlach, was Ikro is Parsha Meraglim, the main thing is the Meraglim. Darf man sagen, der Inyan, that the Sheichas im Teich von Meise Meraglim, that this Inyan, that by the Mekeshes it was L'Shem Shemayim Niskaven, and that's connected to Avodah Zarah somehow. This must also be connected to the Meraglim, because it's all within the Parsha of the Meraglim Parsha Shlach. That man das verstehen, the Rebbe says, we'll understand this. First to explain, what does the Medrash mean in the words that Tosfos brings? What does the Medrash say? That this Mekeshes was Mechal Shabbos, L'Shem Shemayim Niskaven, he had intentions for L'Shem Shemayim, because Oy Yisrael, Emir Yisrael, Kim Shenig Zeraleim, Shali Konos Torah, Maisam Raglam, Shuv Eim Echad B'mitzvahs. Since the Yidden said that because we had the decree not to enter Eretz Yisrael, because of the Meraglim. So B'meila they thought we're not obligated to keep mitzvahs anymore. Omad v'chil Shabbos kadesh yihored v'yirach. So therefore he got up and he was Mechal Shabbos, so he should get killed, and other people will see, so they know that the mitzvahs go on. That's what Rashi said. Tosfos says, I mean. L'chura, the Rebbe asks, it's not so clear. In order for him, all he wanted to do to show that we are still obligated to do mitzvahs. Why, in order to do that, you have to be Mechal Shabbos. We frat as for them come to Nochachet Godel says Dimchel and Nafshesechem Sheikh da Matzmei. First of all, Shabbos is a very big Aveda. Why did they have to pick the big Aveda? Also, by doing this is another Aveda added. He's committing suicide. He did this so he should get killed. Now that's an Aveda in itself. The Pasuk says you're not allowed to spill blood, and you're not allowed to spill your own blood. Rasha says in Parashat Noach, that means you can't spill your own blood. So by doing this, he's causing himself to die. So he's doing another Aveda. Bringt it zu as Yehorig, is bringing it to get killed. He could have brought this out by transgressing a different mitzvah. A very small Aveda, light Aveda. Malchus, Aveda, which you get punished, Malchus, get lashes, or you have to pay money, which also would have brought out the point that the mitzvahs still go on. Why do they have to prick Shabbos? Now, Eichen Targum Yenis steht der Klovos Hachteichen. Also in Targum Yenis, it says the general idea the Mekeish Sheitzim had not make Mechalish I'm Bemezid nor Shem Shemayim Eskavna, that he didn't mean the Mechal Shabbos and intentionally to desecrate the Shabbos, but he had a Kavanah L'Shem Shemayim. But the Targum Yenis and Bavon Fabosar Adavke Mechal Shabbos. But Targum Yenis does say why he chose. If he wanted to show something by being Eiver and Aveda, why did he choose Chil Shabbos? So the Targum Yenis says the Bald Mehodemel nor gewusst Gzeira Shabbos, aber der Einish Mechil Shabbos Knosse the Shabbos Leishtamed Lehein. But they only knew the Gzeira, the din of Shabbos, but they didn't know what the punishment of Shabbos is. That's what he meant. What he's going to do, they'll find out what the punishment of Shabbos is. So he does give a reason why he picked Chil Shabbos, because he wanted to show what is the punishment for Shabbos, which they hadn't known till then. But the Rebbe says, this is only according to the Targum Yenis, that he wanted it, he did it in order to prove what punishment he got for Chil Shabbos. That's not what the Medrash says. Taisus brings the Medrash that he did it because they thought you're not chayv any mitzvahs, and he wanted to prove that you're still obligated to do mitzvahs. You need moving for what Chil Shabbos canal. So it's not understood why did he pick Chil Shabbos, as we said before. Could have done something much easier, much lighter, and you wouldn't have to get killed. Why did he pick Chil Shabbos? Is there beer? But the Rebbe says the explanation is like this: Al pi divrei Masho, based on what the Masho says in Baba Basra, if their shaila concerning the question. Basically, the Masho asks, how was he allowed to do this? He meant L'Shem Shemayim, but how was he able to do Mechal Shabbos? Could the idea of welche Misa is mendan a Mechal Shabbos? He did it so to show what Misa yet, according to the Targum Yenison. Does that allow a person to Mechal Shabbos, even if you have good intentions? How is he allowed to do it? And his masbir, so that Masho answers. He says like this: since he didn't really need the malacha, he only wanted to do it to find out a side thing, what punishment, what misa you get. So it's called the malacha shein tzirich legufa. We have actually it's a machlokes in Gemara in Yehuda Reb Shimon. If you do a malacha on Shabbos, but the malacha, you're doing it not for the purpose of what normally such a malacha is done. He gives an example. Chefer guma, to dig a hole in the ground. You're not allowed to do it. It's malacha of chefer. It's mamish one of the 39 malachas of Shabbos. But ain't tzarech el alafra. You don't need the hole. You want some sand. You dig a hole in the ground because you want sand. Shu poter le Reb Shimon. So according to Reb Shimon, you're poter. According to Yehuda, you're chayiv. According to Reb Shimon, you're poter. You're only chayiv if you're doing the malacha for the purpose of what the malacha is. The malacha is not to make a hole in the ground. If you're interested in the hole, that's the real malacha. But if you're making a malacha in the ground because you need the sand, that's called the malacha she'ein tzricha leguf. And according to Reb Shimon, it's poter. You're not chayiv any punishment. And therefore, tuis. So this is the answer why, according to Targum Yenis, and how is he allowed to do it? Because he did it for the purpose of just people should find out what misa you get. So he wasn't intended in the malacha of picking the wood, gathering the wood. So it wasn't for the purpose of what the malacha is with the mipote. B'meila, he really wasn't over on the real malacha of Shabbos. He says also, you could say, he said this according to Targum Yenis, and that the reason they did it to find out what misa is. But the same thing he says, you could say according to Tosfos. that he was doing it in order to show that you're still obligated to do mitzvahs. So that's also malacha she'eina tzricha l'gufa. It's the malacha that he did, which is gathering the sticks or the wood. So it was not for the purpose of what the malacha is, for the purpose of something else, to show that you're still obligated to mitzvahs. So now, Pizeh is moving like the Medrash, Hamuva b'Teisvus. Now we understand, according to the Medrash, the Teisvus brings. Now we'll understand why he proved it through Shabbos. The question was, why couldn't he do a very small Avera and also prove that the mitzvahs are still there? He would have got punished a smaller punishment. And we asked, why did he do it through Shabbos? Now we understand why. Why that nid gewollt on achet. He didn't want to do an Avera. He wanted to show that the Averas count. In other words, you're still obligated mitzvah, and at the same time not to be doing Avera. How can that be? There's nothing he could, whatever he could do, so you will be Avera. Even though he had intentions for proving something else, but he still would have done Avera. Here you have the only one that you could do it and prove the point, and at the same time not be Avera. Und das ist davke bei Shabbos. This is only by Shabbos. Melach she'en tzricha l'gufa is potter, the Reb Shimon. Melach she'en tzricha l'gufa is potter, according to Reb Shimon by Shabbos. So it's the only thing that you could do, that you'll do the malacha, and as the Rebbe will explain, you get punished for it, and at the same time, you didn't do the Avera. Vis-a-vis, state in Kedushas Leib, like it says in Kedushas Leib from Leib Yitzchak Barditchever, the Loshni says, Im Kain, Lei Chilo Shabbos Klal, since he had other intentions, so he wasn't Mechal Shabbos, because it's a malacha she'en tzricha l'gufa. But now the question comes up, why Taki would he be chayiv? He wanted to prove that you're chayiv and you're doing, people should know that the Avera still continue, or what punishment you get for Chil Shabbos. But if he really didn't do Aveda, why would he be punished for it? He wanted to show that you still get punished. Why was he taka punished? Still, the Rebbe said to stone him, to kill him. As he was mechuyev is getting the punishment. Even though, see, people don't know what a person has in his mind. But the Eibishter knew that he didn't mean to do the malach itself. It says malach she'en tzricha l'gufa. Shem shemayim niskaven. He meant l'shem shemayim. Besides like chil Shabbos klal. Till the Barditchever says is not even chil Shabbos. Nochmer. This is apula tzilip shmira Shabbos. Not only is it not chil Shabbos, what he did was in order to keep, for the benefit of keeping Shabbos. Sein kavani gewenes on his chazak ven shmira Shabbos. His kavana was that shmira Shabbos should be stronger. According to Talgam Yenison, so they should know you get killed for Shabbos. Or according to Tosfos, he wanted to show the Torah mitzvah still, so it's for a good purpose of Shabbos and B'chal Torah mitzvahs by Yidden. So why Take was he killed? He's Mavayde Marsho. The Aksha explains that this is by Leyodo Eidim Shisra Beishos Al Dazu. He was warned not to do it, because if he wouldn't be warned, there's no punishment if a person is not warned by the witnesses or any other warning. So the witnesses who warned him, they don't know what's going on in his mind. So they didn't know that he did it al dazu, on this purpose of whether to prove what misa you get, or according to Tosfos, to prove that Torah mitzvah still apply. These are called dvarim shebelev, things of the heart, of the mind. So if the Eidos came and they just testify he did this, and we warned him and he did it, and the way it looked on the outside, it didn't look like he's doing it for another purpose. He made it look as if he's doing it for the malacha tzricha l'gufa. So the Eidim who saw that he was digging, he was gathering, and it looked like he was gathering for the purpose of gathering the wood. So as far as the Eidim were concerned, this is a malacha hatzricha l'gufa, and that's why they killed him. And the Rebbe explains, is neither pshat. Now we might think that means that the Eidim said it, Bezdin had no choice, so they killed him, but really it's a mistake. But there's no other way to do it. The Rebbe says no. So neither pshat as in them as Mahotim Sekel given betos, but had the idea said him that they stoned him by mistake, because the Eidos didn't really know what was going on in his mind. Because you can't say that. Vorm Torah is doch Torah semes. Torah is true. Is able if you emes misat kavanosa the chil Shabbos kal. If according to the truth, he was not mechal Shabbos, and there's the lotion of the Barditchever leichil Shabbos klal. Kol the Reibishter nit geheisen meisumas ish. The Reibishter would not have said to kill the person if it was a mistake, because the Eibishter knows, and this is Torah Semes. No, it must be like this: the chiyuv skila b'dei, the fact that Bezdin, people down here means the Bezdin, has to kill the person Mechal Shabbos is al pi Torah Semes of the Maaseh Pula. According to Torah Semes, it's the way you do the Maaseh. Whatever the act that you do, We bald as I Maise given a Maise for Chil Shabbos since the act was Chil Shabbos, and to the Eidim, it looked, he made the Maise in a way that it was Amloch Hatzrich Legufa, so it looked that way, and the Maise was that way. It was Alpidin Bezn Shalamata Apula was Miznit was Mizav Dem Mechuyev Skila. So Klal Nit Negei Zakavane. So he did an act that you have Skila. So Mitzad Bezn Shalamata, you have to follow the act. And if the act was such an act that was Amloch Hatzrich Legufa, so you are Chai. And they stuck in the did this like that. That's what the Rebbe said to kill him. So in order 16, the Rebbe says that, and what it says here, that he tried, his kavanah was not for anything else. It was for Shmir Shabbos and Chtei Mitzvah. He brings from China Shuvas and Advaz that if you're doing it Navera and you're Mechavan the Mitzvah, and even though it's a Navera that normally you get Malchus, you will not get Malchus. Why? Because you were Mechavan the Mitzvah. And he says, Moshe Radvaz says, if someone erases, he wants to fix something in a Sefer, and in order to fix it, he erases Hashem's name. He's doing an Avera, but he will not get Malchus, even though normally for erasing Hashem's name, you get Malchus, because his kavanah was good. And that's part of the kasha that the Rebbe said here. Why is he getting punished when his kavanah was good? And we see from this Radvaz. So the Rebbe says, but that's the din. The din is that it's for the Maisa, not for the kavanah. And now, if the kavanah is clear that it's not Moch HaTzricha L'Gufa, then you won't get punished. That's what Reb Shima says. But if the Maisa was Tzricha L'Gufa, but the kavanah was not, then that you get punished anyway, even though the Eibush knew what the kavanah was. In Order 18, the Rebbe brings from the Ramban. The Ramban says, in a certain case, the case of Eidim Zeimim, the din by Eidim Zeimim is if two Eidim come and testify, let's say that someone in Chal Shabbos and he has to get killed. Two Eidim come two other Eidim and mazim them and say, how could you say that when you were with us the day you claimed he saw them happen, this guy do it, you were with us someplace else. So the din is Asisham Lek Ashazam, you have to do to the first group of Eidim what they had wanted to do to that person. Now the din is, let's say in the case I gave, that they said he's Mechala Shabbos, Bezin was ready to kill him, and then the other group came and said that they're Zaymimim, so you don't kill the guy, but you kill them, you do to them what they want to do. But then the din is that if Bezin had already killed the person they testified about, and then the second group is Mazim, the first group, you don't kill him. And the question is, we learn it out from a limit, from apostate, but what's the logic behind it? If they just attempted to kill him, and there's Zaymimim, you kill them. If they actually had the guy killed, why not? So the Ramban says, because if they killed the guy, for sure that person deserved to die anyway. Because as the Lashon he says, Hashem would not allow the judges, the tzaddikim who are there, who are standing there, to pour out, which means to kill somebody who's innocent. As the Eibusher does it. So if the Eibusher does it, it means that's the truth. It's not saying it's a mistake. So the Eibusher will not allow this to happen. So B'meila, we have to say that the Eibush had to kill him because he deserved to die, even though he didn't do an Aveda, but pale, because the Kavanah was not for what the Malacha is, so he did deserve to die. Was Kavanah L'Shem Shemayim, never does, because he did it the mice in such a way. And the Rebbe says in Order 21, that's what the Kedushas Levi means when the Kedusha Levi says the words Raksa Klua Avur Ha'elam Shli Yodam Mizeh Kipshat HaMedrash. He says they killed him not because they didn't Aveda, because the people, the world who didn't know what is in his mind. So that's why they killed him, means the same thing. Not that they killed by mistake, but it was not their fault. That's what they saw. The din is that you have to kill him because of the way he did it, because the Maisa was a Maisa like that. And in Order 22, the Rebbe even adds that it says, it brings from the Sichas that the Rebbe writes in Chelik Tes, the reason why, if anybody did an Avera, that Besin has to kill him, and the situation is that he deserves to die, even if he did Tshuva, Besin Shalmata cannot be Meichel. The Eibishter could be Meichel, but the Besin down here cannot be Meichel, even though he did Tshuva. He brings from the Neid Yehuda, because since he did the Maise Avera, and Besin Shalmata saw the Maise, and Tshuva is something goes in the mind, so Besin doesn't know what goes on in his mind. The din is that he has to die, even though the pale could be his Avera is erased because he did Tshuva, but it doesn't help Besin Shalmata. So Mela, we see here that the Kavanah that he had made it, that he did not do an Avera really, and nevertheless he proved the point. He wanted to prove a point, what punishment to get for Shabbos, or to prove a point, like Taisva says, that there's still mitzvahs going on. He proved this point because Lapel, they killed him. Even though Be'emes, he himself did not do an Aveda. Apizeh is moving the Shaykhs from Parsha Mekeshus to Parsha Avodah Zarah. Now we see the connection between the story of the Mekeshus to the Parsha Avodah Zarah. We find something special by the Aveda of Avodah Zarah, which we don't find in other mitzvahs. Yet the Yitafil Akal Shebekalim, just as comes on the story from Avodah Zarah, as the Chmeisah Nefesh, every Yid, even the lowest of the lowest, when it comes to a test of Avodah Zarah, of worshiping an idol, a Yid, the lowest of the lowest, would give up his life. And he quotes from the Lashon of Tanya, Afilu shaloi lasis rak eisa ma'aseh levad. Neged emunas Hashem echad. Even if he's forced to do just an act against the emunah in Hashem. Again, he gives an example. If someone wants to force you to bow down to Avodah Zarah, a Yid goes on Mesiras Nefesh. Even though it's only because of the force, he doesn't really believe it. And the main thing about Avodah Zarah is believing in something other than Hashem. And he doesn't believe it. He's just doing because he's forced. And he is Meiseh Nefesh. Why? Because Avodah Zarah, this is the point. Avodah Zarah, the Ikir is the Meiseh. We have to understand. The Ikir Chet from Avodah Zarah is the Munah belief. The main Avodah Zarah, the main Avodah Zarah is what you believe in your heart. It is Machshiv, als Metzias, Echad, Mekal Abruim, Bezer Meibishn. You give importance to any creature other than the Eibishter, whether it's a Malach, an angel, Galgal, Lekecha, or the constellation, or the stars. That's Avodah Zarah. As Makabel the Avodas Kechavim al Tzedakah. You accept the idol as your God. That's a feeling. That's in your mind. B'shas hazeina maimer b'klal b'libe. It doesn't need a chet for the Avodah Zarah. Therefore, if you don't believe it in your heart, so it shouldn't be the Avodah Zarah. Or it's a chnit obgirisim for the Meibishn. So you didn't tear yourself away from Hashem because you still believe in Hashem. You're doing it because you don't want to get shot. L'idach, on the other hand, as much as it's not Avodah Zarah because you don't believe in it, I feel and therefore, and we see from here, it shouldn't be Avodah Zarah. And the Rebbe goes a step further before he fears the Maise. That's another point here. So I jumped into it. That the Rebbe says here, I feel Zaloch is the Rambam says that if somebody was forced to do Avodah Zarah, you have to give up your life. What happens if a person didn't give up his life and he worshiped and he bowed down to Avodah Zarah? He will not be punished, the Rambam says. Because after all, he did it by Enes, he did it by force. He was supposed to be Meiseh Nefesh, so he did something wrong by not being Meiseh Nefesh, but he didn't do Avodah Zarah to deserve to die for it. Like normally someone who worships Avodah Zarah have to die. Because you didn't believe in it. You were just forced in it. So we see that Be'emes, being forced without believing is not the real thing of Avodah Zarah. So why is it that a person would be Meiseh Nefesh? Is a Meiseh from Avodah Zarah. Since it's an act of Avodah Zarah, even though it's not the meaning of what Avodah Zarah is, so down here, a Yid feels this is Avodah Zarah, Meiseh Nefesh. And this is Meiseh Nefesh. So we see something special about Avodah Zarah, that what counts is the Meiseh. You could have the Kavanah against Avodah Zarah. And if you do the Meiseh of Avodah Zarah, that's called Avodah Zarah. And das ist der Hemshech from Parshas Mekeshus Eitzim, Yom HaShabbos and Parshas Avodah Zarah. That's a connection between Mekeshus Eitzim on Shabbos, the one that collected the wood, the sticks, or whatever it is, on Shabbos, to Avodah Zarah. Melech Shabbos kol techna verbunden mit Machshavte ve Kavanosei. The Melech of Shabbos is connected, we know, to the Kavanah of a person. That's what the Yom Shabbos is. Meleches Machshavos Oser Teira. It says in the Gemara that the Teira made the Isur on Shabbos and Meleches Machshavos, some malacha that you have your machshav in it. But the far is Menit Chayiv if malacha shein tzerech lagufa, which just is the reason why, as we said before, according to Reb Shimon, that's the halacha that you're not chayiv, not punished for if you do a malacha, the same malacha, but you didn't do it with the kavanah for what the malacha is supposed to be done. What's the reason? Because the Torah asad Meleches Machshavos. Befrat beniten the damas that's geton l'shem shemayim, and certainly in our case of the Mekeshus, he did it l'shem shemayim. He does klal nit kemaisef in Chilul Shabbos. It's not even an act of Chilul Shabbos. Afal pikein. He bald as the meisem et zadatzme v'yezet uis in welt. He does a meisef in Chilul Shabbos. But since the act, the way it looked on the outside, the way the world saw it, so to speak, it's an act of Chilul Shabbos. From those was given am loch shein zirich legufot das klal nit angesehen der meise, because what was seen in the meise, you couldn't see that that's a loch shein zirich legufot. That was the way, because like I said before, you could tell if it's a melacha tzarich legufah. You see why, if a guy is digging a hole, you could see why he's digging it for. So if he's digging it because he wants the sand, the Aedis will see it, so he won't get killed. But if he does it in a way that he's showing that he wants the hole, So he's not showing his kavanah, but he's showing that the slicha legufa is al pitera sem. Es kumt the skill of the mice. He's supposed to get mice according to Torah because that's the real thing. So we see mamish a strong similarity between the story of the Mekashas Dafkin, not just because of Chil Shabbos, because the Mekashas did it Aved of Chil Shabbos and got killed for the mice, even though there was no kavanah. This is connected to Aved Zorah, which is the same thing. There, the problem is the mice, even if there is no kavanah. And now the Rebbe goes to the third thing. Now we'll understand the connection between the story of the Mekashas with the story of the Meraglim. Because we said before, all three are connected. What's the connection to the Meraglim? See, it says in many places, etc., etc. At the Tafa was the Meraglim am gewollt bleiben im Midbar und nicht rein in Eretz Yisrael, weil der Iker Eisek vernieten im Midbar. That the reason why the Meraglim wanted to stay in the desert and didn't want to go into Eretz Yisrael because the main occupation of the Yidden in the desert was sich nicht gedarft vernehmen mit Eisek Apanas. They didn't have to get involved in making a livelihood. They had the money, they had everything that they needed. So what was their main occupation? Is given in Limud Torah. In learning Torah, that's all they did the whole time. K'mayim Chazal, like the Medrash says, who really could learn Torah? Those are the Eidemon. And the Posh shot in the Medrash is that because they Eidemon, they had no other things on their minds, so they were able to really learn Torah. So the real learning Torah is if somebody like it. So they learn Torah all day. The main thing of learning is something that has to do with seichel. There's a pasuk that speaks about Torah. The Rebbe brings the order 31. That's the greatest chokhmah. So it's a chokhmah that you have. And its understanding is seichel and machshava. And in Torah Shabbal Peh, the Rebbe said in order 32, you're not even yetzel learning Torah if you don't understand. You can't make a Berachas HaTorah. So learning Torah by Torah Shabbal Peh, Torah Shabbal if you don't understand. But Torah Shabbal Peh, which is the most part of Torah, is only if you understand. When they bring it, but also the understanding should come in the speech. How will you really understand it if you speak? But the main thing is the understanding. So that's what they did in the Midbar all day. Shaking that it's Yisrael was dort doch Sheishon and Tizra Sadech, we gave him Tizmer Karmecho. In Eretz Yisrael, you have to work, like the Pasuk says, 6 years you work in the field, you planted the field, you pruned the kerem, the vineyard, etc., etc. If you go deeper, what does that mean? That in Eretz Yisrael, the Iker Aveda dort is Maise, mitzvahs Maises. In Eretz Yisrael, the main thing was the action. Do mitzvahs Maise. Certainly there are mitzvahs which is only shaykhs in Eretz Yisrael. But even not that. There, the main thing is Maise. It's not the Aveda of the Kavanah, of the Machshava, that you have things to have in your mind. But there, the main thing is the Maise. All good deeds, Uftin Tovin, which we call it, Uftin Tovin. So that was the difference. That's why the Meraglim wanted to stay. They didn't want to go to do the Maise. They'd rather stay in the Midbar and get involved in Chokhmas HaTorah, in the Machshava, and the Chokhmas, they rather than get involved in planting the ground and doing mitzvahs, begashmias. That mitzvah and verstehen the Iver HaMedrash uva b'teisvus. And now we'll understand the Medrash and Teisvus. Shayim in Yisrael, the Medrash says that the Eden said, since we had a decree not to go into Eretz Yisrael since the story of the Meraglim, so they felt we don't have to do mitzvahs anymore. That's why he wanted to show the mitzvahs still apply. So the Rebbe asks, from Pashtas Loshen HaMedrash is mashman, from the simple words of the Medrash seems as they have not gemeint made as the Medrash chas v'shalom. When they said the mitzvahs don't apply anymore, not because they want to go against Hashem, the mitzvahs they will not mekayim, the mitzvahs they'll not do the mitzvah because they don't want to do what Hashem wants. Nor they said because of the staying in the mitzvah, not going there to Yisrael, ein mechuyavim b'mitzvahs. They said we're not obligated. So they thought because of the not going into Yisrael, we're not obligated to mitzvahs. L'chura tamuah, what's the time for zekas al k'daitav? Not understood. Why? Because we're not going in there to Yisrael. That's why they thought no more mitzvahs. If they would have said, since we are decreed to die, because he said, David said, all these people are going to die in the 40 years in the desert. So if they would say, because we're going to die, therefore we think we don't have to do mitzvahs. We could have said what they thought, even though it's not so simple, but we could have, like we say, kvetched and said, asvara, why they thought you're not mechuyev if they're going to die anyway. As since the decree was that they have to die, so we could look at them as if they're already potentially dead. They thought we're not obligated, just like a dead person is not obligated, we're potentially dead. So you could have thought that. Aber was ist das Al-Kadaitach, Kivish Nigzerleim Shalei, Lakonis La'oretz, Shuvei Mechayav Mitzvah? What do they think? Because they don't go into they're not going into Eretz Yisrael, therefore they won't be Mechayav Mitzvahs. What's it going to do with Eretz Yisrael? But they said, before you could say, the Pshat is like this. This is what their thought was, their Havamina, their thought was. Since the whole union of going to Eretz Yisrael, as we just said before, is that we're going to get involved more in Maisa, that's the Ikid. So they thought, since we're not going into the Oretz, from the Meraglim's time, we're not mitzvah. The fact that we're not going into Eretz Yisrael means now we're going to main thing be Maisa. Now that we're not going in, we're not, and the Rebbe stresses the word La'oretz. Oretz is down here, doing things with the land. We're not going into the land, and it's all because of the Meraglim. That means that what the Meraglim wanted is going to happen. So the Mela comes out, they're not involved so much going to be in Maisa. So they is nicht shaykh, the Aveda, Fekim, mitzvahs of Maisa. So to them it's not shaykh to do the mitzvahs in action, like all the mitzvahs is mainly in action. I feel all the mitzvahs in welches ein not only the mitzvahs that connect to Eretz Yisrael, but even those mitzvahs which they were obligated till then, so they would think, but now it's a different approach. Then we were on the way to Eretz Yisrael, so we had to do certain mitzvahs. Certain mitzvahs don't only apply in Eretz Yisrael, but the other mitzvahs we have to do. But now that we know we're not going in, so now it changed. Certainly that some mitzvahs were specifically given as an introduction to their entering of Eretz Yisrael. As beschus von die mitzvahs in Eretz Yisrael, the certain mitzvahs that the merit of these mitzvahs go into Eretz Yisrael. And I already said, L'moshel mitzvahs tefillin and Peter Chamer, these different mitzvahs. So we're going to stay in the desert. And in the desert, the main Aveda is learning Torah, machshava, thought or speech, but not Maise. So they assume now, they're thinking, we're not going to be chayv mitzvahs. Because mitzvahs are Maise, mainly Maise. And since now we're not going in, it's going to be like the Meraglim wanted, the inyan of machshava. So uis mitzvahs, so maybe we're not mechuyev to do mitzvahs maisis. But then come the hemshech for maisav keshes eitzim. That's what continued with the story of this mekeshes eitzim. Omar v'chil Shabbat k'dei shehorig v'yalachedim. He got up and he was mechal Shabbos, so he should get killed, and other people will see. This means like this. Das bringt to is what he did brings out. Azeich in dinyone was kol techne was mlechas machshavas. And even those things which the main thing is the machshava, like Shabbos. That we said before Shabbos. The main thing is a machshava, and if not, it's not an aveda. So even in that, where the main thing is machshava, and he did it l'shem shemayim. And so if the ikar is a machshava, his machshava was good. His machshava l'shem shemayim, not chas v'sholem to go against the Eibishter. Von deswegen is eich bezed the ikar the ma'isvel. Even in something like Shabbos, where the ikar is the kavone. Because without the kavanah, there's no avera. The maise is the main thing anyway. But the far zok teira semes, that's what the teira, which is true, not just saying, well, since you don't know, you have to kill him. Teira, which is true, means that that's the din. The psak alocha lamata is as dos is chil Shabbos neskum the far skila. The psak din lamata is a this chil Shabbos, and you have to get skila. So it showed them that even though he wanted to do something, that even though the kavanah is good, nevertheless, the Gabba, the Psak Din of Besen Shalmata, you get killed because it's Chil Shabbos. When das hat gelernt, the Eden was eine Dämmel gewesen im geblieben Mieder. This taught the Eden that were left in the desert, as Afa Pish Nikasar Leib Shalei Lakonas La'oretz, even though the Gzeira was that they don't go to Eretz Yisrael, Idos Nors as a kumen nit on zum Ike Kim Mitzvah B'maise. That means that they will not come to Eretz Yisrael, where the main thing is that you do Maise. This is not Yisrael, not Yisrael. Aber eich sei verbleiben dik in Midbar, but even though they're staying in the desert, is the Aveda in the Geya Be'iki v'das kumt up a Maisa Apel. Still, even then already, the main Aveda is when it comes down into Maisa. If you feel it's a Shaykh with Midbar, whatever Shaykh is in Midbar, because some mitzvahs were not Shaykh to the Midbar, mitzvahs of planting and Shemitah, things like that, not Shaykh is in Midbar. But whatever mitzvahs you have to do, like Shabbos and other things, is the main thing is the mitzvah. And don't think that now mitzvah mitzvah don't apply. Because the main part of the mitzvah, which is mitzvah means commandment, but also has a meaning of tzavse v'chibur, connection. The word mitzvah means connection with neighbors, with Hashem, is durch ma'aseh mitzvah comes durch ma'aseh mitzvah. And now we see the connection of all three. The ma'aseh, the meraglim, seem to made a havamina that maybe ma'aseh is not negeya. And so that's why they thought that there's no more mitzvahs maisiyas. Came the Mekeshes, and the Mekeshes showed them that even in things which kavona is important, maisa is the ikir, and that's connected to Avodah Zarah, because there we see how maisa is the ikir. And even if you bow down to Avodah Zarah without intention of worshiping it, nevertheless you can go Mesiras Nefesh, because that is Avodah Zarah, because that's the ikir, is the maisa. And this is the real meaning of the words, ha maisa hu ha ikir.